Hello and welcome to a video where I use Sewable LEDs for the first time, upcycle an old flower crown, and end up with a cool headpiece I can wear when I go into the forest to befriend fairies or whenever flower crowns come back into fashion. Whichever happens first. When making this project, I used white Sewable LEDs, a sewable coin cell battery holder, and battery, conductive thread, jumper wires, which may be a better choice if you're making this and own a soldering iron, unlike me, which you'll see becomes a bit of a problem. And finally, a flower crown. I had this one lying around from when they were in fashion back in 2015. I didn't feel too sorry for it in case I messed it up, as this was my first time using sewable components. The first thing I did was make sure the LEDs worked. I hooked it up from the 3.3 volt pin on my Arduino to a breadboard which had the LED held in place with jumper wires. I was pleasantly surprised to find how bright these LEDs were, but that made it tricky for my camera to focus. As you can now see, there's a plus sign marked on the power side, and the other side should be connected to ground. With the LED lit up, I checked that the flowers would diffuse the LED nicely, and it turned out they did. I tried to connect all the LEDs on the breadboard in a form reminiscent of how they were going to be sewn, but quickly realised 2 jumper wires wouldn't fit, so I connected them all to the rail lines instead. Next, I had to figure out how to connect the coin cell battery to the flower crown. Originally, I was hoping the battery holder would be small enough to simply attach to the headpiece, but quickly realised that wouldn't work. So I decided to use an old hair clip and attach the battery holder to that instead. This way it could be clipped to the back of a shirt or dress with brown jumper wires connecting it. I chose brown since I'm brunette. I also double checked the battery holder wasn't a dud, and thankfully it wasn't. I traced the flower crown roughly on a piece of paper, making an outline and then going back and outlining the main wire. I noted where I wanted the LEDs to go with blue pen so they'd align nicely with the flowers on the crown. Luckily, this green fabric was already lying around my house. It's a close enough green to the crown that it wouldn't be too noticeable, and it was fairly thin and lightweight. I cut it to the length of the flower crown with some excess just in case. Then I started sewing. I stitched the first LEDs in place along the ground lines, looping 4 times at the connections, or maybe a couple times more than 4 because I was paranoid. I'll link below the tutorial I followed. Using the Arduino again, I checked the ground line was working before I went ahead. I sewed the power line too, up until the second last LED where I ran out of conductive thread. Turns out 2 meters of conductive thread wasn't enough. So I quickly went and hit up my local J-car, got more conductive thread, and finished off the LEDs. I used glitter nail polish to coat the knots on the LED pads. Doing this secures them in place. Although I had clear nail polish hiding somewhere in my house, I chose glitter so that I'd be able to see what I'd coated. Plus, this is for a decorative project, so the glitter would be a nice touch. Between the second and first LEDs, I forgot to weave the thread in and out of the fabric. So with some green thread, I quickly fastened it. With sewable electronics, especially ones worn on skin, you need to insulate the threads from one another. If the ground and power lines touch, they can short circuit and mess up your project. So I knew I needed to cover the lines with fabric. I ended up wrapping fabric around the LEDs so it would have 2 layers either side, sewing a line down the middle to divide the ground and power lines so that they wouldn't touch when the fabric was twisted. I also cut out triangles at the LEDs to help later on. I did this between every LED and then checked that when the fabric was twisted, everything still worked. To ensure the knots that I really badly sewed stayed in place, I coated them in even more glitter nail polish. By this point, I was nearly reconsidering the glitter as it was getting everywhere and that stuff just does not go away. However, it did its job and that's all that really matters, as long as I don't get glitter in my eyes. Again. Lining the fabric up with my pencil sketch showed the fabric was still nicely aligned to the crown. I was really nervous about how thick the fabric was and fitting that to the crown, but luckily when I wrapped the pieces with green thread they condensed considerably and my worries dissolved. These conductive thread trails were my next task, as I needed to find a way to connect them to the jumper wires that would connect to the battery holder. I did more of what I've done for the rest of the project and grabbed my green thread, tightly sewed the jumper wire to the fabric, sewing the metal pin with conductive thread, and drowned the thread in glitter nail polish so that it would stay. I did the same thing to the upper wire and quickly confirmed everything was still operating. But then, disaster struck. Okay, it wasn't actually that bad. The pin on the other end of one of the wires I just sewn snapped off. Remember, I don't own a soldering iron. Of course, if I did, I could have just soldered that back in place, no problem. Instead, I stripped the wire, revealing the copper core, and twisted that around the battery holder tabs. Over that, I used conductive threads to really secure it in place, and of course, glitter nail polish. I stripped the other otherwise fine jumper wire and did the same thing, and was relieved that this all worked. Thank goodness. The final steps. Gee, I was relieved to get to this part with most of the sewing behind me. I lined the fabric up with the crown and began tying it together with green thread. This time I hunted and found the clear nail polish, and use that instead. I was done with the glitter. Then, with everything tied, LEDs adjusted, and battery holder blue tacked to the hair clip, it was done. I'm fairly proud of this little messy creation. For a first sewable electronics project, I'd say I did pretty good, and the end result is a coherent creation. It definitely shows up better in dark or dim environments, like a fairy forest, but it is still visible in daylight. The brown jumper wires shouldn't be too difficult to blend in with hair, and the 1 jumper wire length between the clip battery and the flower crown I think is a comfortable distance. Overall, I'm pretty happy with this. I hope this little project amuses you, or perhaps serves as some inspiration for you to try your hand at sewable electronics. Thanks for watching, and feel free to subscribe, I guess.